Well, 2 months ago, Joe Oliver was saying no problem. The slumping price of oil was all factored into the government's economic projections. In fact, he said similar things just yesterday. So much for that theory, as the finance minister today delays his budget at least a couple of months, waiting, I guess, for better factoring material. Is the economy about to slide into the same tank oil has fallen? And if so, what does it all do to election planning? Andrew came down with the flu this evening, so Paul Wells, political editor at Maclean's, is with us from Ottawa. Meanwhile, Chantel's in Montreal and Bruce is in Calgary. So this 24-hour flip-flop on the budget, Chantel, you start us off. Is this smart politics, or is this looking like a finance minister or a government that's not quite sure what it's about to do here?
Well, it certainly is novel politics. I can't think back to an example of a finance minister basically saying, I'm not too sure what the lay of the land is, so I'm going to delay the federal budget by a couple of months. I suspect that part of the rationale is that the Conservatives had planned more tax breaks for the pre-election budget, and they're delaying to see if they can hang on to them. It certainly is striking anyways. This is a finance minister that felt confident enough that he knew the lay of the land to set off billions of dollars of recurring tax breaks last fall, even before he declared the deficit was gone. And now, from month to month, he's pushing back his annual budget.
Bruce, you're in Calgary, and we've witnessed this week Jim Prentice saying, look, we're really not sure what's going on here, and we've got to refactor everything. Does one assume that may well have had an influence on what you're witnessing today from Joe Oliver?
Well, possibly. I think the same factors are at play, as well as the whole question of this is the budget leading up to the next federal election campaign for the Conservatives. And Peter, I think, what we saw today was another example of Joe Oliver. He may be the most senior minister in terms of the portfolio holds. He's not the strongest communicator. This was awkward politics. It wasn't a confidence builder in Mr. Oliver. But nor do I think, though, that the public will particularly mind if the budget date is pushed back. The average voter won't spend a lot of time wondering exactly what the machinations were that went into that. And from my standpoint, I assume along the lines that Chantel said, that this finance minister didn't want to produce a budget that plugged in a number for the price of oil that is similar to the numbers that we see today, if he thinks that in a period of time, not too far into the future, they'll be better.
Paul, what's your take on it?
This prime minister, because it was the prime minister's call, of course, is a control freak, and you actually can't control the economy. So there's often a bit of jitters around budget timing. They like to announce when the budget's going to be as close as possible to when they have it. There's often a lot of shimmy about 6 weeks worth of difference between the earliest time they've had a budget and the latest time they've had a budget. Obviously, they're a lot more nervous now because this is really bad times for the price of oil. But I actually don't think it's a big problem for them if they have trouble meeting that zero deficit target. First of all, because it gives them yet another excuse to do some more cutting. They will cut spending before they would, long before they would ever rescind some of these tax measures. And the other thing is, if the economy's a little shaky, if it's looking a little peaked around the temples, the prime minister can go in an eventual election campaign and say, this is absolutely the worst time to hand this economy over to a bunch of drunken sailors like the NDP and the Liberals. So I mean, this is not ideal, but I think it's manageable for this government.
Bruce was talking about Joe Oliver's communication skills. I want to show you a clip from today when he was trying to explain why he was delaying, but also at the same time trying to say that, we're on top of this. We've got it figured out. This is what the finance minister said this afternoon.
While we're certainly not in the business of forecasting where prices will go, one thing is clear from history. It's when prices fall a lot, they tend to go back up, and so we'll take that history into account as well, and we remain comfortable, as I said.
What do we make of that kind of explanation, Bruce?
Well, I'm reminded a little bit of what Stephen Harper said several years ago when the stock markets collapsed. He talked about a buying opportunity. A lot of people jumped on him for that. As it turns out, he was probably not wrong. So there's the whole question of whether or not Mr. Oliver is probably right, that we're closer to a bottom in terms of oil prices than a situation where they won't go back up. But that having been said, a statement like this is really about building confidence in the government's ability to manage its economic affairs and to instill a sense of optimism. I think Mr. Oliver was trying to deliver a sense of optimism and instill it in other people, and I think that's probably a prudent political thing for the government to do. I just don't think he's terribly good at doing that.
All right, I want to show you another clip of Joe Oliver, and it kind of plays to the point Paul was making a moment ago on how they may try to position themselves if, in fact, the economy is starting to look shaky, is in trouble in terms of the management of it. Watch this from today.
During this difficult period for Alberta, our federal government is taking action to protect Canada's economy and secure its long-term prosperity.
What's interesting about that is we've witnessed the last couple of years them trying to position themselves on the economy by saying things are in great shape and it's our management that made it great. Now, we have a hint, at least from there, and Paul suggesting it as well, that they will now try to position themselves as the great protectors of an economy that could be in trouble. Chantal?
Yes, and for now, polls show that the economy is a stronger card for the Conservatives than it is for the Liberals and for the NDP. But if you want to call others drunken sailors, then you have to make sure that you don't look like one. And when you start playing around from over 24 hours over the timing of your budget and the impact of an oil price drop, when you set in motion some $20+ billion of tax cuts that today, come July 1st, may not be what the economy needs from the federal government, you're starting to look a lot like a drunken sailor yourself.
Paul?
It strikes me that this Prime Minister, I believe, would like nothing better than to be the one who redeems the place of our natural resources in Canada's economy and politics. In 2006, when he was first elected, his first major foreign speech in London was about Canada as a natural resources superpower. And the day after he won his majority in 2011, in his press conference the morning after, he talked about how the Liberals and the NDP had endangered the place of resources in Canada's economy, and he was going to protect it. And of course, he set off after that with the Keystone and the Gateway and all that. And it's been utterly jinxed as a file for this Prime Minister. He hasn't been able to get these files to advance. And now it would be ironic if oil became a big political liability for Stephen Harper.
Bruce, on that?
Well, I read through a transcript of the speech a little while ago, and I was really struck by one passage where I thought it was actually a well-written speech on these points. Mr. Oliver really laid out a challenge to the NDP and the Liberals on the price of oil. He said, look, we understand that a low price of oil cuts both ways. There are consumers who feel the benefits of that, but there's the economy which is suffering some ill effects as well. And he went on to say that it's such an important strategic priority for Canada to get our oil to Tidewaters, to be able to ship it to other markets. Rather than kind of back off that at all, he used the opportunity that low oil prices present, to kind of double down on it. We'll see how well it works, but he really was challenging the other the two-party leaders on the opposition side about that issue.
All right, I want to shift topics here a little bit and talk about Thomas Mulcair as the NDP meets this over these next few days, talk about their election strategy. We've watched him a couple of times now take a not-so-veiled shot at Justin Trudeau. Here it was today.
Being Prime Minister is not an entry-level job. Over the coming weeks and months, we'll invite Canadians to ask themselves, which leader has the experience to defeat Mr. Harper and the plan to repair the damage he's done?
Is that going to work, Chantal?
Well, it didn't work for the Conservatives, who tried it for, a year and a half. I'm assuming the NDP is responding to a lot of anecdotal evidence that you do hear, and I do hear it about Justin Trudeau not having the experience. But I'm not sure that the argument actually plays for the NDP. If you really feel that, I'm meeting more people who think that Stephen Harper will keep his job than are saying Thomas Mulcair is our man.
I guess you can say at least one thing. Mulcair went for a long time not even acknowledging that Justin Trudeau even existed. Now he is in this particular way, and as you say, the Conservatives tried it on this front as well. Paul, what do you make of it?
Well, Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have led in the average of national polls in every month that he's been the Liberal leader, 21 months. At some point, ignoring him stops to be a reasonable strategy. being a national leader heading into an election campaign is also not often an entry-level job, or at least not for successful leaders. And Tom Mulcair's hit some rough waters himself. He's just given his chief of staff the heave-ho. He's essentially begun to reconstitute piece by piece Jack Layton's 2011 campaign team after essentially telling them, thanks, but I won't be needing your help when he replaced Jack Layton. It's obvious that Mulcair is the furthest from contending reasonably for power. But he's a sly devil, and he's been at this for a long time, and I wouldn't count him out. As for turning on Justin Trudeau, this is exactly what the Conservatives have been hoping Mulcair would do, and are quite confident that he will do for most of a national campaign. Mulcair himself promised me on Labor Day when I interviewed him that he wasn't going to do any such thing, but he's had a look at the polls since then.
Bruce?
I think Tom Mulcair can't afford to ignore the Justin Trudeau problem that he's got. And so I think he knows the risks of how that might play out for him, that there might be a backlash on him, and he's decided that the risks are worth taking. He's used 2 points in the clip that you said, that he has more experience than Justin Trudeau has. I'm not sure how strongly that will play with Canadians outside of Quebec who don't really know his experience or might not see it as being all that relevant to the federal prime minister's job. He also talked about having the plan to undo Stephen Harper's harm. And I think that's the bigger problem for the NDP, is that a lot of Canadians aren't sure that the NDP plan is the one that they want to replace the Conservative one if they want a change in government.
How about Paul's point, Chantal, that this in many ways plays right into the Conservatives' hands?
Yes, because if as some by-elections have suggested, Canadians who are looking away from the Conservatives are turning to the Liberals, and you convince them that the Liberals are not up to the task, they're not going to the NDP. They will be going back to the Conservatives. Remember the voters who everyone is playing for here, or at least the Liberals and the Conservatives, are people who voted Conservative in 2011, probably voted Liberal in the previous elections. And they are not inclined to cross over to the NDP. If they don't think that they find what they want in the Liberals, they go back to the Conservatives.
Last quick point. Do you think there's a pause going on here in terms of the government strategy, trying to decide? It appeared for the last couple of months that they were happy to be heading into an election that could be fought on the security issue. Now they're suddenly confronted with the possibility that it could be the economy. Paul?
I believe they have actually always wanted to run on the economy. The security thing is what it is, and it's hard to predict. The economy, they believe, is their strongest hand. And there's no telling when a security crisis is going to pop up. There was one in Belgium tonight. Whereas the economy is longer term, and it touches more people directly in the way they live their lives. And I believe the Conservatives have always felt themselves to be underestimated by the likes of us on that question. But they were kind of hoping it'd be a healthier economy than it is. And but that's what makes politics interesting.
And who knows what it might look like a few months from now, or later than that in the fall. Okay, we got to leave it at that for this week. Paul, thanks for joining us, filling in for Andrew at the last minute. And we know you're jet lagged, just back from Paris. A lot of us will be looking forward to reading your piece on the Charlie Hebdo story tomorrow as it hits the newsstands across the country in Maclean's. So thanks to Paul, Chantal in Montreal, and Bruce in Calgary this week.